Hey guys, and welcome back to Ready Steady Play. And I've got a super prototype edition of a new game here to show you. Altars, Traps of the Deep. And as you can see from the box, this is super prototype. So rather than my normal super comprehensive rules and setup, what I'm going to do is sort of give you guys a flavor. I'm going to skip right over components because these are not final. I'm going to show you just briefly how it's set up. And then we're going to jump right into gameplay, and I'll just kind of talk you through what you can expect from the game in case it's something that interests you. Because this is not even on Kickstarter yet at the time of this video. But what I am going to do is play it with my friends, and I'd like to give you some insight into how it works, so that you can follow along with our gameplay. Altars, Traps of the Deep feels a lot like what you would get if you combined that Indiana Jones scene at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark, where he's running away from the boulder and trying to dodge all the traps with Euro-style game mechanisms. And it is, I would say it's a pretty solid middleweight game, light to middle. It probably takes about an hour to play. It's for 2 to 4 players. And what I'm going to do now is set up the game and show you how it plays. So we've got 2 different board sides. We've got the 2 to 3 player board and the 4 player board. We've got a health tracker in case you get hit by those traps. And we've got this glory tracker here as well. In a cool kind of twist, you'll be setting traps to try and catch your friends out. And if you do catch them out and spill their blood, then the god of this shrine that we're robbing will actually reward you with glory points or favor points. We've got a little player aid here. We've got some score sheets. A big old bag of tokens, but, you know, those will make sense later. More tokens and stuff. These are traps. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to set all this stuff up for 3 players. So when you're setting up the 3-player game, you're going to use these 4 boards here, and you completely randomize their layout. The key issue is that you've got these walls here. You just got to make sure that when you're setting up these board edges, there's at least 2 passable zones. Here we've got 3. That just makes sure that people can still move into other parts of the temple. So with this random board layout, there we go. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this chasm and put it between this section and this section. More on the chasm later. We're also going to use these remaining boards here. This is the starting positions. And here we have the... these are for checking the rows and columns for certain hidden treasures and traps and things. So these are like little coordinates. And here we've got markers for the deadly, deadly traps that are going to be set off by your friends in an effort to halt your progress and aid them. It's very important that we put out the traps in the correct order. So here we've got the spike trap, we've got the earthquake, we've got the arrow trap, we've got what's called the guard trap, but it's more just spikes that shoot into you. We've got what's the secret doors and the flood. Each of these traps have fun and exciting effects that we're going to find out about in a minute. Each trap has a set of activation tokens associated with it. You can see the colored backs, but you can also match them because these symbols on the front of the card indicate what's on the underside of each activation token. One of these tiles on the 4th board here is the exit, and the exit has a hidden coordinate. So we're going to take 6 exit tiles and pick 2 to show the secret coordinates of the exit and put them out. These ones determine the row, so shuffle them and put one out in secret. These ones here determine the column, so shuffle those as well and put one out in secret. These are hieroglyph cards, and they have a special effect that's going to come into effect every round. And I'm going to put out 2 that will take place in every round. Now, there are 2 kinds of hieroglyphs. So these are ordinary hieroglyphs, and these are special hieroglyphs that cannot be played in the first 2 rounds. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick 4 hieroglyphs for the first 2 rounds, then shuffle these together and put out the remaining 12. So the first 2 rounds of hieroglyphs are deployed face up so that everyone can see what's going to happen and even have a little glimpse into the future. Now that I've done the first 2 rounds, I'll just give these a shuffle with the remaining hieroglyph tiles and I'll deal out the remaining 12. There will probably be some left over that you can return to the game box. I've got a couple of secret door tokens here that we're going to put out with the secret door. I got a round marker here to put onto the round 1 position. Alright, now I got a whole collection of different tokens here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to use all these tokens here to populate the board with treasures. There are basically 3 kinds of treasures that we're going to put out on the board here. We've got these treasure chests, and these treasure chests contain lucky stones, and the lucky stones are represented by all these colored discs up here. Then we've got these 4 different sacred gem types here, blue, yellow, purple, and green. And then these are called the Heart of the Mountain, which are very special gems, which is why they're so big. But you can only find them with these treasure maps. So what we're going to do is we're going to put out these pieces of the treasure map onto the board. We're going to put out these lucky gemstone chests, and we're going to put out these sacred gems. And when you're putting out these gems on the board, what you're going to do is put them on these different shaped plinths. You've got circle plinths and square plinths, and some boards have 2 spaces and some have 1. The number of gemstones that you put on each board is based on the number of players playing the game. Each player is going to receive 2 markers, a game piece, and a trap selection piece. And in a 2-player game, each player will have 2 pieces, but in a 3-player game, each player will only have 1, and in a 4-player game, each player will only have 1 as well. But what I'm going to do is I'm just going to populate the board with crystals, with this final room having the most crystals and being the most valuable room. Unfortunately, there's this red chasm blocking it. More on that later. Just note that in this version, what I'm going to do is put out the gems and map pieces and treasure chests for a 3-player game. So what I've got here are the crystals that will be randomly placed onto the game boards 1 through 3, and a random assortment of crystals for game board 4. I'll put those out in a minute. We're going to shake these up, and you can randomly sort of drag these out any way you like. You might use a cup or a bag. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take these crystals here, and I'm going to put 1 on each space that contains at least 1 circle symbol. These remaining 2 spare crystals go here and here, onto the spaces containing square symbols on the second board. I'm going to do a similar thing with the crystals for board 4. So I'm going to put 1 on each circle symbol on board 4, and 1 onto each square symbol as well. This board has a lot of nice resources on it. I'm going to take the luck chests, which contain these lucky stones over here. I'm going to put these out onto the square symbols on the board. And you just fill up all of the square symbols on the board. You'll have some left over, which can go back in the box. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take these here map pieces. What's important to note is that there's 2 different kinds. Once again, each one of these will form coordinates. You can see these ones here correspond to the columns on the bottom of the boards. These ones here are corresponding to the rows. These are going to give you the coordinates of a square on the 4th board. So we're going to make 3 random pairs by taking 2 sets of 3 tiles. We'll return the rest of the map pieces to the game box because they won't be used this game. Then we're going to take these pieces and put them randomly into these spots on the game board with empty circles. The last thing we're going to do is take some curse tokens here and put them into each space on board 4 that contains 2 things. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take 2 of each of these luck stones. I'm going to give them a good old shuffle in my hands, and I'm going to put them out randomly into these starting locations on the left. The remaining luck stones are returned to the pool. So the only thing left is for the players to pick a color and set up their pieces. So we'll set up blue, red, and yellow. Now we're going to randomize the starting order here, but this is going to change pretty quickly. More on that when we get to gameplay. These tokens are the player's trap tokens, and they'll hang on to them for now. Each player will take 1 of their other markers and place them onto the 23 space here. In a 3-player game, each player starts with 23 health, but it varies depending on player count. In a 3-player game, each player also starts with 1 glory, so we'll put our remaining pieces down on that space there. In a 3-player game, each player starts with an additional glory stone. And with that, the game is set up, and we're ready to begin playing. The object of Altars Traps of the Deep is to race from this side of the shrine all the way across to the exit on this 4th tile here, collecting as many sacred gems as you can along the way. You will score points at the end of the game for escaping efficiently, for collecting sacred gems, for your position on the glory track, for your hit points. You will gain points for having a Heart of the Mountain, more on that later, and you will lose points for having curses and for having the most curses. There are 8 turns in the game. The game is divided up into 4 main phases, but the final round of the game has a surprise 5th phase. The 4 main phases are the refresh phase, which sees us doing general board administration. The second phase is the trap phase, where we will pick what traps we want to activate this round. The third phase is the action phase, when we will carry out actions on the board with our pieces. And the last phase is the activation phase, where the traps will activate and potentially do damage. The first round of the game works a little differently. What we're going to do in the randomly selected player order is pick a starting location. And the location you pick will give you 2 luck stones based on your position. More on luck stones and what they do later, but they are critical to your success, and they're a resource that can be spent for different effects. In this case, we'll just put out some random positioning, with the blue player going down here, the yellow player will pick this spot here, and the red player will go down here. We can remove the remaining luck stones, they won't be needed anymore. Now, in the reverse of the order the positions were taken, each player will pick a trap they want to activate this round. So, what you'll be doing in this phase is looking at the board and trying to decide where you think your opponents will end up. Red will place first because they chose their starting position last. Once all the traps have been chosen, players will activate in the activation phase in the order of the trap they have chosen, which means that if you pick the spike trap, you will play first. Red decides that the spike trap is deadly and he wants to play first, so he puts his trap piece down here on the spike trap. Then you pick an activation token. I'll explain traps and activation tokens in more detail later on, but when you pick an activation token, you put it into the first slot above the trap board like this. And then yellow will pick her trap, and blue will pick her trap, and so on. Now that each player has picked a trap, they will activate their pieces in the order of the traps they've chosen, with red playing first, and then yellow, and then blue. I'll explain traps and endgame scoring in more detail a little later on. For now, let's talk about the activation phase and what you can do on the activation phase. Once you understand how that works, we'll look at the endgame scoring, and then we'll look at how traps make everything much more complicated. The action phase is really very simple. You have 4 actions you can spend to do 3 things, and you can do each of those 3 things as many times as you like in any order and any combination. The first action is movement. You spend 1 action to move 1 space. It should be noted that these are walls, and you cannot move through the walls. However, you can move freely between the colors and the boards. If the red player were to move from there to here, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4, their entire turn. But if you want, you can do a special move action called run. When you run, you move an extra 2 spaces. So if you have 4 actions available, you'll get a total of 6 spaces of movement. However, that is the only thing you can do this round. It is possible to become stunned, in which case you will have fewer actions available, and so when you will run less distance. 1 space less for each action you have unavailable to you. The second action you can do is heal. When you heal 1 space on the health track. You can do as many heals as you like, and if you only do heals, then you can do a special rest action. Much like running, resting means that you can only do healing, but you get 2 extra health points back. Just like running, if you don't have your full 4 actions available to you, you will heal 1 less point for each action you have unavailable. So if you have 3 actions and you rest, you will gain 5 hit points. The final action is called take, and take just means pick up something in the space you are in. Our red player might decide to move 2 spaces into here. Use take to take this lucky stone chest. And when you receive the lucky stone chest, it has 3 lucky stones on, and you can pick 2 to keep. You take the appropriate stones from the supply, and then the chest is discarded. 2 other things to note about the take action are the map pieces and the curse pieces on the final board. When you pick up these map pieces, you will need to find one that looks like this and one that looks like this. These two come together to give you coordinates. These coordinates will appear on the final board of the game. As you can see here, I've got column 1 and row here. This means that I can activate these pieces in either of these two spaces, and I will receive a Heart of the Mountain. And we'll talk about the Heart of the Mountain in just a minute. But the other thing to note about board 4 is if you pick up any pieces from a space containing a curse cube, you also take that curse cube. The Heart of the Mountain has two effects. In addition to being worth a whopping 35 points in the endgame, it also allows you to manipulate these exit pieces. Remember these exit coins and the mysterious 5th phase in round 8? Well, that 5th phase is called Escape. It takes place at the end of round 8, and you must escape the shrine. There's no player elimination, so everyone will be able to get out, but if you escape efficiently, you'll be rewarded with bonus points, and if you escape inefficiently, you will be penalized with negative points. The first person to pick up the Heart of the Mountain can have a look at the coordinates of the exit, which are indicated by these two discs, and if they want, they can even change one. The second player who acquires a Heart of the Mountain can look at the coordinates, and the third player can look at one coordinate. Anyone acquiring a Heart of the Mountain after that is out of luck. So speaking of the Heart of the Mountain and 35 points, let's talk for a minute about endgame scoring. At the end of the game, you will be awarded points for all of the sacred gems you've been able to pick up, for your Heart of the Mountain piece that you've been able to pick up. You'll be awarded points for your position here on this glory track. You'll be awarded points for your position here on the health track. You will also be awarded additional points for each spare movement you had when you escaped at the end. But we'll talk about the escape phase in a bit more detail later on. You will then be given penalty points for each space you were away from the exit, and you will be awarded penalty points for every curse you have. Here on this player aid, you can see that the yellow gems are worth 10 points, purple gems are worth 5 points, blue gems are worth 3 points each, plus 20 if you have the most, and 10 if you have the second most. The Heart of the Mountain is a whopping 35, and green crystals start at 1 point but get exponentially more valuable the more of them you collect, at a whopping 102 if you get 9, but that's only possible in a 4-player game. Curses are worth negative 1 point at the end of the game, and if you have the most curses, it's a negative 8 penalty, and negative 4 for the second player with the most curses. Here you can see on the glory track, we've got points along the bottom, so your position on the glory track will award you the number below. Over here we've got the health board. The first thing to point out about the health track is that it's divided into sections. We've got section 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7. So at the end of the game, you'll get victory points, which are listed here, and these decrease as you lose your hit points. If you pass this point, you'll gain curses, and down here you actually get negative points. If you get to the very bottom and continue to lose health, you'll lose favor points. This also is tied into these footsteps here. So at the end of round 8, there's this bonus escape phase. In the escape phase, you will get a number of feet, which are marked here on the health track, which will give you a number of a movement to get to the exit. So once the exit is revealed, we can see here that it's space 1 here in column 2, which means you can exit from either of these two spaces. You will have a number of points to get to one of those exit spaces. Now this might be relatively easy for you, or it might be relatively hard for you if you're further away. For every extra space you have when you exit, you'll gain 2 additional bonus points. And for every space you are away from the exit, you will take 1 extra curse. So you're probably thinking, that sounds relatively straightforward. I move through the board, I collect the sets, I get the bonus stones, I collect the map pieces, I know how to do it, and all I have to do is make sure I get better stuff than my opponents. Well, if you think that sounds easy, then you're wrong, because here is the complicating factor. It is the traps. At the beginning of every round, we set the traps, then the players take their actions, and then the traps go off. Each trap has a different effect that can do different things, and now I'm going to walk you through them. Realistically, in a 3-player game, you would only ever have 3 traps activating per turn, but I'm going to show you all 6 traps. Notably, these 2 are not really traps because they don't do damage, they just sort of allow specialist movement, but they're still categorized as traps and they activate in the trap activation step. It should be noted as well that traps are activated in this order. So what we've got down here is the green spike trap, and when we flip this over, we can see it's going to hit the green squares. Taking a look at our board here, we can see that this means yellow is hit by the spike trap. The other two are safe. When a player is hit by a trap, they take this damage. In this case, it's 2 wounds and a curse token. So yellow takes a curse token and 2 wounds. So the next trap in the queue is this earthquake trap, and the earthquake trap is set off according to the columns. So in this case, we've got an earthquake in column 2. This is going to hit our red player. When the earthquake goes off, you can choose either to take 1 wound and become stunned, or 4 wounds. Now we know how taking wounds works, but let's talk about stunned. Stunned is super easy. You just take one of these stun tokens, put it down in front of you, and on your next turn you get 3 actions instead of 4. Then we've got this arrow trap. The arrows shoot out of walls with the color matching the token here. In this case, we've activated the blue walls. Any player in this space and this space, this space and this space is also hit. So this trap has hit 2 players. It was set off by yellow, so that means that red and blue are both going to take 2 wounds and a curse each, and yellow is going to gain 2 glory on the glory track. Whenever your trap hits someone, you gain that many glory points. Next along here, we've got the spike trap, and the spike trap is going to set off the bronze spikes. That means that anyone standing in a space next to a bronze spike is hit. In this case, it's only the red player. The spike trap always does 4 wounds. Here we've got the secret passage, and the secret passage triggers off of walls just like the arrow trap. So here we've got a red secret passage. The player who put down the piece will take these 2 secret passages. They'll put one into a red wall, and this can be anywhere. It doesn't have to be in the space that they're in. Then they'll count 4 spaces away and put down the second piece. Again, this can be on any board, except for board number 4, so long as the chasm's still in play. In this case, our player goes 1, 2, 3, 4, and puts down the secret door here. Because they're in the same space as the secret door, they now may automatically travel through it if they wish to do so. If they don't want to travel through it now, they can also do it for free during their next action phase. Other players can also travel through the secret passage, but they must spend 1 movement to do so because it's not theirs. The final trap is the flood. And the flood has a directional arrow. You orient the token so that the white marker is at the bottom, and then each player moves 2 spaces in the direction depicted. In this case, blue would hit this wall and stop, red would go 2 spaces this way, and yellow would also hit this wall and stop. The player who activated the flood can also collect 1 thing for free from the space they ended up in. Now remember, in this example I triggered all the traps, but you will only trigger traps that have been set by players. Whenever you hit another player with your trap, you gain 1 glory point, but you do not gain a glory point for hitting yourself. However, you do gain the penalty, whatever it is, wounds, curses. Going back to the beginning phase of the game, the first thing that happens in the admin phase is that any trap that was triggered in the last turn has its token moved 1 space to the right. This means that traps that were just used become more predictable, because you know that one of the tokens is missing. If someone sets the same trap again, and then it's triggered, once both slots at the beginning of the trap card are filled, you'll pick up both tokens and reset the trap. The next thing you'll do in the trap refresh phase is determine the player order for choosing traps, and this is done by the rearmost player. In this case, yellow would choose a trap first, followed by red, followed by blue, because blue has advanced the most on the board. If 2 players are in the same column, then whoever entered that column first will count as the rearmost, and so will be put to the front of the queue. Once you've determined the order of players for trap choosing, you will reveal the next 2 hieroglyphs. And I'll talk about the hieroglyphs in just a minute. Finally, you advance the round marker, and then you proceed to the trap selection phase. Just before I get to the hieroglyphs, I'll just point out that when the game advances to round 7, that is when the chasm disappears, and it is possible to enter board number 4. Because this board only opens up at the beginning of round 7, this means that you will only actually have 2 turns in order to grab all of this cool free stuff before the game ends. Remember, at the end of round 8, we'll have the escape phase, and then it's final scoring. So, let's look at the hieroglyphs, then we'll cover luck stones, and I think we know how to play altars. Hieroglyphs are special cards that have an effect on the round. Each card has a different effect indicated by the iconography, and I am told that this iconography will be revised and simplified for the final version of the game. There are 2 hieroglyphs affecting each phase. In phase 1, we had these 2 cards. This one says whenever you pick up a blue sacred gem, you may take 1 free move action. And this one says you may spend 2 actions to move through a wall. This one says whenever you're hit by a trap, take an extra curse in addition to any other penalty. I'm not going to go through all the hieroglyphs, but we see quite a lot of them in the gameplay, so make sure you check out our series on that. But you'll always be able to see the hieroglyphs affecting the current round and the next round so you can plan ahead. The last thing to talk about are the luck stones. You have a personal supply of luck stones that you can spend at any time for the following effects. The luck stones are conveniently listed here on this prototype player aid. The green ones will give you an extra action. The black ones will remove 2 curses. The white ones will allow you to move through a wall. The red ones will give you back 3 hit points. The yellow ones are placed onto your threat meter and double your points for people hit by traps this round. When red goes to pick the spike trap, they put down their glory token on top, and this shows anyone hit by spikes this round will provide 2 glory points instead of just the 1. The final luck stone is the blue flood token. Now, this can be spent to prevent the effects of a flood if you don't want to be moved by someone else's flood. Alternatively, you can spend it when you're setting the flood trap. When you spend the blue luck stone to set the flood, you can pick 2 activations instead of 1, putting 1 on top of the other. You make sure that you pick the order carefully because the 1 on top will be activated first, followed by the 1 on second. The player who set up the flood can do a free take action after each time it is activated. So if they were positioned here, they would move 1, 2, they could then pick up a free gem, then they would go back 1, 2, and they could pick up another free gem, and also they would take this curse. So I hope that's given you guys some really good insight into how Altars Traps of the Deep works, but I'll be back tomorrow with Michael and Ollie as we dick each other over running through the shrine. So I hope you'll come and join us for that. Thanks for watching!